In the serene hills of Kpalimé, two women sat by the fire, weaving baskets. The crackle of the flames danced in rhythm with the sound of rustling palm leaves, wrapping the scene in a calm, earthy harmony. Beside her was Senna, a woman of similar age, with sharp cheekbones, gold earrings, and a restless gaze. She had recently returned from the city, her stories full of promise, money, and ambition. The two had grown up together, sisters in all but blood. Though Afi still lived humbly, content with her woven crafts and simple life, Senna seemed to glow with unexplained fortune. Weeks turned into months, and the once modest compound of Senna began to shimmer with signs of sudden wealth, bold new fabrics, a polished motorbike, and rumors whispered of land purchased in the capital, Lomé. One humid evening, a stranger appeared. Cloaked in shadow, he wore a leopard-tooth necklace and dark flowing robes. He offered no greeting, only a carved wooden mask, and then vanished without a word. That night, in the stillness of her room, Senna lit a white candle and knelt on the woven mat. Her lips moved in a tremble as she repeated a chant taught by the cult. The mask sat in front of her like a haunting witness. She had made a pact, riches in exchange for a soul. And the soul had to be close, innocent, trusting. As she held the mask in shaking hands, her mind wandered unwillingly to Afi. Senna smiled brightly one morning as she approached Afi with a suggestion. "Let's visit Papa's old cocoa farm," she said, her tone casual. "For old time's sake." Afi agreed, trusting as ever. They walked deep into the thick cocoa groves, their footsteps muffled by leaves. The air grew dense with silence. When they reached the clearing, Afi looked around, puzzled. "Why here?" she asked. From the shadows emerged a robed figure holding a blade, his face hidden, his step silent. Afi froze, her breath catching. Senna stood behind her, hands trembling, caught between fear and the pole of darkness. "I can't," Senna whispered, her voice cracking. Tears filled her eyes. The figure stepped forward to strike, but a sudden scream pierced the air, sharp and desperate. A hunter, drawn by the scream, emerged from the trees. With quick instinct, he tackled the attacker, sending the blade clattering to the ground. The grove erupted into chaos. Afi collapsed to the ground, unconscious from the shock. The hunter carried her gently through the forest, the morning light flickering through the trees as the truth slowly began to surface. The chief's younger sister arrived at the village square, her presence commanding silence. She studied the ritual markings found on Afi's clothing and gasped. Her regal voice broke, "These are the same symbols, from when my son disappeared." The chief called for an emergency council. As the sun dipped low, elders from surrounding villages gathered beneath the great baobab tree. Senna was brought forth, her wrist bound with twine, her eyes swollen from weeping. "I didn't go through with it," Senna cried. "I was promised land, money. I lost my way." Her voice cracked with desperation. The villagers watched in tense silence, their eyes judging but also fearful of what lay beneath her confession. The council debated deep into the night. Fires were lit around them, casting flickering shadows on their weathered faces. Afi, still recovering, sat silently nearby, her gaze distant but unwavering. At last, the verdict came. Senna would be exiled for 10 years and forced into labor far from Kpalimé. The court's secrets would be revealed. The village would never tolerate such darkness again. Afi's wounds had healed, but the scars in her heart run deep. She spent her days under the shade of the village tree, teaching young girls to weave baskets, passing on both craft and caution. She told them stories, not of monsters, but of choices. Beware of smiles that do not reach the eyes, she would say, her voice soft yet firm, her fingers always weaving. One day, before the sun rose high, Senna was brought to her. Guarded, chained, and silent, she was allowed one final word before her exile. Her eyes, once sharp with ambition, now flickered with regret. She dropped to her knees. "I was blind," she whispered. "I hope you can forgive me someday." Her voice barely carried, but in it was a weight that pulled silence over the watching villagers. Afi looked at her for a long time. She gave no words, only a nod. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. Senna lowered her head in understanding. Senna was taken away. The village watched until she disappeared down the dusty road, her figure shrinking beneath the morning sun. The silence she left behind was heavy. Life resumed in Kpalimé. The wind still rustled through the cocoa trees. Children played. But when the breeze grew cold and sharp, some swore they could still hear a whisper of betrayal, of mercy, and of a bond nearly broken. "You see, I've come to understand something. Trust is a beautiful thing, but it should never be blind. I trusted her with all my heart. She was like a sister to me. I never doubted her words, never questioned her smile. But not every smile carries kindness. Some carry something darker. If I had listened a little closer, paid more attention to what wasn't being said, maybe I would have seen the signs before it was too late." We must all learn to look deeper, to protect ourselves without closing our hearts. And when she came to me, broken and full of regret, asking for forgiveness, I didn't speak. I simply nodded. Not because I had forgotten, and not because the pain had left me, but because I refused to let hate grow in its place. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't always about the other person. Sometimes, it's about freeing yourself from the weight of what they did. That nod wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning of healing. Now, I spend my days teaching the young ones. We sit under the trees and weave baskets just like I used to, with love, with care, and with stories. I tell them not about monsters, but about choices. I remind them to trust their instincts, to question the things that don't feel right. If the scars I carry can protect even one child from making the same mistake, then maybe everything I went through had a purpose.